Meet The Lot, native token of Lukki Exchange and the most potential tool for investing this year. Trade now on P2B, B2B and Lukki.io.
Tom,
Hello.
thank you so much for meeting me here.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Cool. So I did interview you last year, or 8 months ago,
Yep.
a little bit ago. But so for those who maybe didn't catch that interview or aren't necessarily familiar with what you do, who you are, can you give us a little introduction? Let us know what you're up to.
So I'm the co-founder of Fundstrat Global Advisors. It's a research firm that primarily focuses on macro, so financial markets, and our client base is primarily financial institutions, hedge funds, mutual funds, family offices. But we spent the last few years building a practice around cryptocurrencies. I think it's one of the sort of major structural secular stories that over the next 20 years is where a lot of value creation takes place.
Yep. One huge announcement that a lot of people are talking about in this crypto space is Facebook and their announcement to create a cryptocurrency. Some people are begrudgingly calling it a cryptocurrency, Libra coin. I'd like to know your opinions on it and how you think it will affect other platforms owned by Facebook, like Instagram, Snapchat, and WhatsApp.
Yeah.
What's your take on Facebook?
Libra it's a really big deal. It's a project with a scale that I think truly does have the potential to bring mainstream into cryptocurrencies. Facebook has over 2 billion users. They have 100 committed partners so far, including Visa and all the major players. But, their advisory board's pretty impressive too. They've got guys like Chris Catalini from MIT. And so I think it really has the potential to really turn cryptocurrency into a mainstream, Main Street finds crypto.
You don't think, so you think it will kind of overflow into the rest of cryptocurrencies? Do you think it might spark some curiosity for that?
I think it's going to create a huge halo because let's say Libra, which is designed to be a stable coin, ends up being what people view as, crypto dollars. Traditional fiat money is primarily used for speculation. So for every US dollar that's used to buy coffee or a sandwich, and that's 20 trillion a year, it's used 96 times for financial speculation. So most of the use of a dollar is to speculate on financial assets, which means that Libra will be primarily used to buy crypto assets.
Interesting. Yeah, there's more to say about that too. Also, with there was an article I read about how there's like 2 lines in the white paper for Facebook talking about their plans to help tackle this identity crisis and how they might help to establish a standard.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see what is required to get a Libra coin and how if they plan on tracking that. I think eventually too it will help the entire crypto space.
Yeah, there are some noble sort of goals, right, with the idea of banking the unbanked, and I think they spend a lot of time talking about how remittances, which the unbanked really use, is so expensive today. It's roughly 7% transaction cost, and with crypto you can move money for almost nothing. But I'm sure the people who are concerned about privacy and permissionless systems, may be a little leery of Facebook, but I think overall, it's a net positive.
Yeah, for sure. It's a way to reach the masses from the top down rather than trying to go from the bottom up, which has been the past 10 years in this space. So how do you think this Libra coin announcement will change institutional investors on cryptocurrencies in general, or if that's even possible?
It's already had a big effect. I'd say our client base is traditional financial institutions, and for them, cryptocurrencies has always been more of a curiosity because it's a small market, it's hyper volatile, and so this has really awakened a lot of institutional interest. So when I come back to the States, we're going to be doing a lot of meetings with hedge funds and sort of giving them a 101 of crypto. And in fact, even while here on the other side of the world, we're doing, even tonight a conference call for a major client because they need to be sort of up to date right now.
So there's an urgency in it.
Yes.
That's interesting. Do you think like the potential profits to be seen will be the kind of motivating factor for them to explore other cryptocurrencies?
I think institutions really like trending asset classes, so something that has an opportunity where they can gain an edge through some trading technique. So I think it's going to be very important for Bitcoin to recover to its all-time highs. But the idea of cryptocurrencies, I think once institutions study it and realize, it's a network-based these assets are network value-based, meaning, today the market's quite small, and in the future, if we're talking about 1 billion users of cryptocurrencies, the market could be huge. I think that's what gets them excited.
Yeah, and with a limited supply.
Yeah, that's right.
Huge factor as well.
Yeah, that's why Bitcoin, I think ends up being sort of the where most institutions will dabble, because there's so much infrastructure being built towards acquiring and trading Bitcoin, and I think LibreCoin ultimately becomes an on-ramp for that as well.
Okay. So another hopeful, everyone's hoping for these institutional investors to flood in, and a part of that also is the Bitcoin ETF. For those who maybe are new to the space, maybe they just learned about Facebook Coin and they want to know what Bitcoin is about, and they happen upon this interview, can you let them know what an ETF is and how would that open the door for more retail investors?
Yeah, well, an ETF I think is a huge deal. It's kind of a controversial subject within crypto because those who are native digital want everyone to own and store crypto on their own wallets. But that form of crypto ownership is inconvenient and I think technologically difficult for most people. So, out of the future, let's say 2 billion people own crypto, I think the majority won't own it directly through wallets. So one of the more convenient ways to acquire financial assets is through an ETF product, which trades on an exchange. Today that's how most people buy gold, or they buy oil equities. To date, an ETF has not been approved for crypto, and I'm surprised it actually has not even appeared in any other country. But in the U.S., the SEC has really set the bar high for an ETF to be approved. Okay, so an ETF isn't necessarily someone buying an actual Bitcoin or storing it themselves. Why do you think if an ETF does get approved, how would that affect the real price of Bitcoin if it's not actually Bitcoin that's being traded? Yeah. Well, the ETF by charter has to own the underlying assets. So an ETF, as each share is created, has to actually own the proportionate underlying assets or the equivalency. So if you have $1 billion ETF created, that ETF entity has to acquire $1 billion worth of Bitcoin.
I see. Okay.
So it's quite bullish because if you look at the 10 or even the 20 most successful ETF launches, in the first year, the 20th is $1 billion. So imagine that's $1 billion of buying demand for Bitcoin in the first year, which is $20 million a week. After the halvening, there might be $7 million of Bitcoin as block rewards. Mm-hmm. This ETF could acquire almost all of the incremental supply for Bitcoin in the first year.
Wow.
And so imagine what that would do to the price.
I see. So it does involve real Bitcoin.
Yeah.
At some level, but that's pretty.
Yeah. The only risk is if there's this thing called hypothecation or rehypothecation, but I think the SEC would not allow any substitutes or the relending of any of the Bitcoin. So I think an ETF would authentically be acquiring the Bitcoin, putting it into cold storage, and you're essentially taking out $1 billion of supply as the ETF grows.
It's a giant Bitcoin masternode.
Yep, that's right.
That's amazing. So the SEC hasn't approved an ETF. It's delayed it many times. What do you think needs to be met with the market, or what are they looking for one to get approved?
Yeah, I think the bar is really high. I think that's why it's going to take a long time. I think the biggest issue is traditional financial institutions are not comfortable with crypto, and I think crypto has a history of sort of being this rogue libertarian, and in the beginning was obviously used for drug dealing and Silk Road and illicit activities. So I think that the reputation of crypto has to change. But the explicit argument they've made is that there's not enough price transparency, that which is important in ETF because, one, you don't want to have what they call breakage, that you want the ETF to track an underlying price, but what's the price? If we have exchanges with fake volumes, which price do you use? I think the bar's high, and so I don't think it's going to happen this year. And I think Facebook really helps move the case forward because it's legitimizing cryptocurrencies, but I think it's a good thing because I think there's a potential that the day the ETF is approved, Bitcoin's price is going to immediately rise because every miner is going to stop selling. And so the liquidity would become a market where there's only buyers and no sellers. Move exponentially the day it's approved.
Yeah.
So
The golden number everyone's hoping for, I believe.
yeah.
So you're someone who a lot of people enjoy your price predictions because they're bullish oftentimes. Most recently, Bitcoin has seen, well, your most recent prediction that I saw was something to do with, correct me if I'm wrong, if Bitcoin were to find support at the $10,000 level, it would be very easy for it to reach 40,000 within a couple months.
Yes.
Now that we've seen that, I think we've found some support in 10,000. We'll see, but it jumped up to almost 14. Has that affected your price predictions, or what do you think about the recent action?
Well, I think that this year has been really like a cascade of things that have reinforced the crypto winters over. I think maybe the first most important thing was Bitcoin reattained its 200-day moving average, and in its 10-year history, whenever it's above its 200-day, its price return is 10 times better than when it's below its 200 days. So that was a big hurdle. And then we had the golden cross, right? So the 50-day crossed above the 200-day. But I think that one of the key levels this year, something we've been writing about, was 10,000, because that represented a price that Bitcoin's only traded at in 3% of its history. So if you look at the prior cycles, anytime Bitcoin gets into that rare range, like where it's only traded 3% of its history, a type of FOMO kicks in. And I think we saw that dynamic because as soon as we broke above 10, we almost went straight to 14,000. And, now, there's a bit of a pullback, and I think it's because Bitcoin's hyper volatile. But I think now in people's minds, they have to think back to those past cycles that once you break above that 3%, Bitcoin likely goes up 200 to 400% over the next 4 months, which means, it could be as high as 40,000 before the end of the year.
Let's hope for that one.
Yeah.
Let's see.
No more ramen.
Yeah, and that's right. No more instant noodles.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of the macro funds that are trading crypto are really sort of using those kind of round numbers in their heads. So as they're establishing new positions, they're thinking that, look, out of any kind of risk asset they can buy today, in a world where the dollar's weaker, 21% of bonds have a negative interest rate. To them, crypto looks like, a real opportunity.
Yeah, so. And it's interesting to see how a new emerging kind of economy can compare to something that's struggling or maybe, I don't want to say fading away, but it's a stark contrast.
I mean, I'm not trying to pick on gold, but gold's an example because like gold, people are really excited because gold's broken out this year. I think it's up 8%. In that same period of time, Bitcoin is up almost 300%. So, gold's a huge market. Crypto is tiny, but it's so immature. And I think another interesting thing is I've heard a lot of our traditional macro clients start to think about store value. And that's like sort of an element of Bitcoin that people probably in the earlier days talked about. In the last few years, people have been more focused on mining or ICOs. But I think as a store value, there's obviously a huge potential because, when people think store value, there's art, there's gold, and with Bitcoin, it looks like it's a legitimately good reserve currency.
Yeah. When institutional investors finally see the light of Crypto Day and they are in the market, it's a thing. It's not so much hyped up anymore. How do you see that affecting trends, like in terms of businesses cropping up to try and service institutional investors? How do you think that they will affect the crypto space?
There's going to be a lot of opportunities for value capture. Because as institutions start to genuinely spend time and allocate resources, number one, there's going to be a lot of value in terms of institutions having what you'd say like our on-ramp capabilities. So entities that offer insurance or custody services, and there will unfortunately be leverage products built around this. And I think we're starting to see some of the traditional crypto exchanges develop exotic options and derivatives. That's quite profitable. We can see it today because obviously the most profitable businesses in crypto today are the exchanges. But once you have traditional financial institutions, and then you have miners who are what we'd call commercial, and then you have retail. I mean, that's how you get the kind of liquidity that helps fuel a true ecosystem. And then, coming back to Facebook, that's where, Facebook could really capitalize on a cryptocurrency, whether it's through Instagram or WhatsApp and, the idea of commerce services, very similar to what WeChat is using, or, Facebook starts to look more like a bank.
Interesting.
Yeah.
It's on a side note, I tried to start an Instagram account for I did real crypto tips. Instantly got flagged, and I had to verify myself, so we'll see what happens. But they said it was like a violation of their terms. By the way, Facebook's starting a cryptocurrency.
Yeah, that's actually interesting. Because I got to think Facebook over time really wants to use Instagram as a way to get people interested in Libra.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a given. Use the tools that you have to.
Maybe you have to call it Libra
have.
Tips, not
Libra Tips. Oh no. That's when I've gone off the deep end.
Yeah.
Okay, so speaking about price discovery and how, with the fake volume and with the ETF, it's hard to know what the real price of Bitcoin is. Do you think it's possible to find an objective price of Bitcoin based on, maybe just the pure supply and demand? How many people on this earth exist and how much Bitcoin can be distributed? Or what do you think of that?
I mean, it's a challenge. I mean, I think there's a couple of ways to try to derive a sort of fair value for crypto or for Bitcoin. As a fiat, you have to. It's very difficult because the U.S. dollar is impossible to figure out what fair value is. It's but if we think of it as a commodity which is extracted, then I think mining, the cost of mining becomes a good analogy. And today, even with the new ASICs, the break even for Bitcoin is, because hash power is higher, it's probably 5,000 or 6,000 fully loaded for all miners combined. And if Bitcoin's trading at 2.5 times that multiple, fair value then is, it's 13,000, 14,000. But that's today. Then you have the halving in a year, and so I think the break evens are going to change. But from a reserve currency perspective, I think it's easier to think of Bitcoin as a hedge against macro disruption. And today you can see it clearly that Bitcoin is inversely correlated to the dollar. It's starting to take on positive correlation to gold. And I think if someone had a view that the dollar is 10% overvalued, which is about right, in fact, the IMF actually using what they call real effective exchange rates has determined that the U.S. dollar is overvalued. And so Trump's right in terms of complaining about the dollar being expensive relative to other currencies. But a 10% correction in the dollar in 2018 was a 40% decline in Bitcoin. So if the dollar falls 10%, it should be 40% upside for Bitcoin. So it'd be bullish.
Yeah. There's that hedge again, and that store of value. Maybe what do you think Bitcoin would be trading at 10 years from now?
Yeah. When we think about the future of Bitcoin, I think that the best way to think of it is as a network asset. So today, let's say generously there's 50 million holders of Bitcoin, and I think that number's too high. I think there's probably at most.
People are going to want to hear this.
Yeah. I think today at most there's probably 500,000 crypto users.
Okay.
Is to go from 500,000 to 5 billion. So what is that? That's 10,000x, right? Wait, hold on. I gotta do this.
Slight
math.
increase.
When we did a Metcalfe's Law, which is a network value model for crypto, we found that just using a network value model, which is that the value of a crypto asset is the square of its change in users. And that explained 80% of the price move of Bitcoin. That would imply. Sorry, I gotta do this.
Yeah.
I gotta just do this math really quick.
When our teachers taught us not to use calculators, they didn't know we'd have a computer in our pocket.
Yeah, I mean, this.
It's a lot of zeros.
Yeah, I mean, this would be basically, yeah. So, in theory, if Bitcoin, went from 500,000 users to 5 billion, right? So let's say that it becomes as prevalent as Visa, MasterCards. Bitcoin's per unit value would be in the hundreds of millions of dollars per Bitcoin. Which of course, is theoretical. But the reason I think it's an important exercise to do is that if you look at FANG, so that's Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, and Google. These are probably the 4 most important stocks in the S&P 500. Huge source of wealth creation. I think it accounted for 25% of the price gains of the S&P. So just 4 stocks accounted for 25% of the gains the last 20 years. So it turns out that 75% of the return of those stocks is purely explained by the change in global internet users from the day the company was formed to the time to today.
Wow.
So even though they all have different business models, they all were beneficiaries of an internet adoption cycle. So when you see people with projections like Bitcoin worth $1 million, it's not a stretch if adoption is as prevalent as it could be.
Yeah, that's interesting. And then it begs the question, what would drive that need for that level of adoption? Is it capital flight, or is it hyperinflation of your currency or whatever? But it's good to have that option, I think.
Yeah. There's a lot of things that need to happen because today I think crypto is very difficult to use today, and Bitcoin is quite slow. I mean, there's obviously solutions to improve the usability of Bitcoin. The erosion of trust in governments and central banks is a big story, but I guess guys like Facebook and making it is a much more mainstream product is really the key.
Fun times ahead. Is there anything else you'd like to talk about? Maybe something you're excited about in this space, or what you're working on, or?
I would say that in the next 12 months there are a lot of catalysts coming. I think it's going to be a very exciting time because I think that there's going to be a very big increase in interest within crypto. Part of it's the halvening, and part of it is Facebook, and so we'll see.
Yeah.
It's exciting.
I mean, we're seeing this just from the announcement of Facebook, and then when it actually comes into play, that'll be pretty exciting to see as well.
Yep.
And then everyone's going to be asking about LibraCoin and Bitcoin, so learn up and be ready to be an encyclopedia for your friends.
There just won't be any upside in LibraCoin, right? It's a stable coin. So.
No, that's probably a good thing as well. Cool. Well, those are all the questions I had for you.
Will there be a Tom Lee coin?
Fun strat coin.
I'm not sure there'll be a lot of utility on a Tom Lee coin, but it's actually a funny question because the circulation supply of Libra could be huge, right? It's I think that's one of those dynamics that we should think about. But Facebook has 2 billion users, and if every one of their customers put in $10, it's $20 billion of circulation. It would be a major stable coin. And, when you think, I think the pound has, the M1 of the British pound is only 37 billion. So these numbers are, I'm not sure, that might be right. I'm not sure about the pound. But yes, the circulation supply could be huge.
What do you, random question, what do you think of this concept of tokenization and everyone having their own coin? Is that like a viable option for an economy? What do you think?
I think someone's going to crack the code around, sort of tokenization, because it really has the potential to sort of blend the concept of like what's traditional money and then what's traditional value. As today, when we hear STOs or security token offerings, the way they're essentially structured more like private units of some existing asset. And in traditional financial markets, these would be viewed as illiquid assets. So they typically trade at a discount. So, if you're a venture capitalist today and you have an equity unit of some sort of private company like Airbnb, and you trade it on a secondary market like one of these secondary markets, like Shares Post, they're often traded at a discount to NAV. So I think one of the tricky things is today STOs will have that liquidity problem, so it's not functioning in the way that people are envisioning. But in the future, yes, I think tokenization really has the potential to really change what we consider the nature of money.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like how the internet has changed, and like YouTube has changed how people earn money and think of their jobs. Like I have a YouTube channel. People were like, oh, you make money with that? Or like, well, I also, invest in Bitcoin. A lot more successful with that. But the concept of having, distributing your value and seeing that return to you is really interesting.
Yeah, and it's really going to prove that, like, in the future, reputation's going to be important. That it's one of the few things that everyone individually would value. So
great. Well, this was a super talk. I really appreciate it.
Great.
Sun came out. The storms parted for one day in West Australia. So thank you so much for this interview. I really enjoyed it. I think everyone here definitely appreciates the information.